Don't you dare scold my sons. Take care of your own. Those were the words, said in a living room on a Sunday afternoon in front of three boys who deserved better than to hear them, said to a man who had packed their lunches every morning for 2 years, said loud enough that the walls held onto them long after she stopped speaking. My name is Barrion Christopher, and I want to tell you exactly what happened, not to make her look bad, not to make myself a hero, but because the truth of what broke us and what nearly rebuilt us is too important to let disappear into silence. I need to start before that Sunday, before the shouting, before the white envelope on the kitchen counter and the 4-hour drive to a cabin nobody knew I owned. I need to start 7 years before I ever met Angela, in a hospital room that smelled like antiseptic and grief, where a woman named Renee pressed my hand against her cheek and told me something I have never forgotten. She was 3 days from dying. We had been engaged for 11 days. A blood clot nobody saw coming, moving through her body like a thief in the night. I sat beside her bed every hour of those 3 days, and on the final morning, she looked at me with eyes that were already starting to let go, and she said, "Don't let grief make you hard, Barry. Whoever needs you next, show up fully." I carried those words like a stone in my chest for 7 years. I built things in those 7 years, quietly, deliberately, the way men build when they have no one to come home to and too much pain to sit still with. I started as a warehouse manager at 22. By 41, I owned 11 commercial properties across 3 states. I drove a modest truck. I wore plain clothes. I kept 1 savings account visible and 4 investment accounts nobody ever asked about. Not because I was hiding anything, but because I had learned early that what you build alone, you protect carefully. The total value of what I had constructed in silence across 18 years of early mornings and disciplined choices sat at $4.2 million. Angela never asked. I never told her. We met at a grief counseling session, her 14 months after losing her first husband Desmond, me 7 years after Renee. There was something in the way Angela sat in that room, straight-backed but fragile, like a woman holding herself together through sheer willpower, that made me think of what Renee had said, "Whoever needs you next." I proposed after 14 months of learning her. I knew about the 3 boys, Devin, 16 at the time, Elijah, 13, Kofi, 7. I chose all of them. What I didn't know then, what I wouldn't fully understand until much later, was that Angela was carrying something she had never shown me. Something from Desmond. Something from her own father, something that had been waiting quietly inside her for years, looking for a door to walk through. On that Sunday afternoon, in our living room, it found one. Please, before I continue, kindly like, share, and subscribe for more interesting stories. 3 months before that Sunday, Devin found the phone. Angela had asked him to help clean out the guest room, reorganizing boxes, pulling things from shelves, making space for what she called a fresh start in a house that was still figuring out how to hold all of us together. Devin was 16, broad-shouldered, quiet in the way that some boys are quiet when they have seen too much and decided that words cost more than they return. He pulled a box from the top shelf, and inside it was Angela's old phone, the one she had stopped using when we got married and she upgraded. He plugged it into the charger strip near the baseboard without thinking much about it. The screen flickered on before he could set it aside. He told me this himself, much later. He said he didn't go looking. He said the name on the screen was just there. The way something you were never supposed to see has a way of presenting itself at exactly the wrong moment. A name he didn't recognize. A thread of messages long enough that even from a distance, even without reading a single word, it told a story. He put the phone in the box. He walked out of the room. He never mentioned it to me, never mentioned it to Angela, never mentioned it to his brothers. But from that afternoon forward, Devin watched his mother the way detectives watch suspects, not with hostility, but with careful, patient attention. He watched who she texted. He watched whether her eyes moved toward her phone when she thought nobody was looking. He watched the way she laughed at something on her screen and then looked up too quickly, guilty and bright at the same time. I noticed Devin watching her. I didn't know what he had seen. I thought it was just the complicated math of a teenage boy navigating loyalty to a mother he loved and a stepfather he hadn't fully decided about yet. I gave him space. That was what I always gave Devin. Space and consistency, because those were the two things I could feel he needed most. What Devin knew and what he was sitting with completely alone was something I would only come to understand after the envelope and the drive and the 30 days of silence. Angela had been in contact with a man named Terrell before she and I ever met, and based on the messages Devin glimpsed, the contact had not fully stopped when she married me. I am not telling you this to build a case. I am telling you this because it explains a thing that otherwise makes no sense. Why Angela, a woman who was in many ways tender and present and genuinely trying, could detonate the way she did over something as ordinary as me telling her youngest son to finish his homework before the game came on. The guilt of a secret is a fire that needs somewhere to go, and the closest available target is almost always the person who loves you most openly. Elijah was 13 that year, long-legged and faster than he looked, running track at his middle school and failing pre-algebra for the second semester in a row. I had started sitting with him on Tuesday evenings at the kitchen table, working through the problems slowly, not because I was a math genius, but because nobody had ever sat with him and said, out loud, directly, "You are not stupid. You were just never taught right." The first Tuesday I said it, he looked at me like I had spoken in a foreign language. By the fourth Tuesday, he started calling me something under his breath when he thought I couldn't hear. Not Barrion, not even stepfather. Dad. He never said it to my face. Angela had told all three boys early, firmly, without room for negotiation, that I was her husband and their stepfather, and that was the boundary of what I was to them. I understood it. I respected it. But Elijah had drawn his own quiet conclusion, and he stored it in the same private place boys store everything they are not yet old enough to say out loud. I found out about it the morning I left. In the note I left folded beneath his lunch bag in the refrigerator, I told him I already knew. I told him it was the best thing anyone had given me in 7 years. I didn't know that, as I was writing it, Elijah was asleep down the hall, already counting the days on a calendar pinned inside his closet door, though he didn't yet know what he was counting toward. 3 days before the Sunday. I brought Kofi home from the neighbor's fence myself. 2 older boys from the block stood on the sidewalk watching as I walked him up the driveway. Kofi was 9 years old, and his jaw was set the way young boys set their jaws when they are embarrassed and trying to look unbothered. I didn't grip his shoulder. I didn't raise my voice. I just walked beside him and said quietly, "You're better than that wall." Saturday, we come back together and we repaint it. That was all. That night, Kofi told Angela I had embarrassed him in front of his friends. I was in the bedroom when I heard her go quiet in the kitchen. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, the kind that precedes weather. What I didn't know, what I couldn't see from the hallway, was that behind her eyes, something ancient was moving, a flash of her father's voice, a crowded classroom, a younger Angela shrinking into her shoulders while a man she loved corrected her loudly enough for everyone to hear. She blinked. She was back in the kitchen. Kofi was still talking. She nodded slowly. Her jaw tightened. A decision was already forming. Sunday afternoon. The living room held all of us at once. Devin on the couch, Elijah cross-legged on the floor, Kofi near the television. I was standing near the hallway telling Kofi calmly that homework came before the game. My voice was even, my tone was measured. I had said harder things more gently. Angela walked in from the kitchen, and something in her snapped open like a latch. "Barrion, don't you dare scold my sons. Take care of your own." The room stopped breathing. Devin looked up from the couch. He didn't look at me. He looked directly at his mother, and his expression was not surprise. It was recognition, the look of someone watching a thing they always feared would eventually happen. Elijah stared at the floor. Kofi looked confused, then looked at me. I said nothing. I looked at Angela for a long moment, not with anger, but with the quiet of a man whose decision just made itself for him. Then I turned, walked down the hallway, and closed the bedroom door softly behind me. Not a slam. A close. The most devastating sounds are always the quiet ones. 20 minutes later, someone knocked on the bedroom door. Not Angela, not Kofi, Elijah. I opened it, and he stood there in the hallway, looking at me with those track meet eyes, always calculating distance, always measuring what the next stride needed to be. He said, "You were just telling him to do his homework." I said, "I know." He said, "Are you leaving?" The pause that followed lasted too long. I knew it lasted too long. I watched him feel the length of it land on his chest. I wanted to say something clean and reassuring. I wanted to give him the answer that kept everything intact. Instead, I said, "Go do your homework, Elijah." He stood there 1 second longer than he needed to. Then he turned and walked back down the hallway. I watched him go. I noticed the way his shoulders carried themselves, slightly braced, the way you brace when you already know the fall is coming and you are just deciding how to land. I closed the door again, sat on the edge of the bed, looked at my father's watch on the dresser. I already knew what I was going to do. I had known the moment she said "your own." I just needed the house to go to sleep first. 4:43 a.m. The house was completely still. I moved through it slowly, deliberately, with the kind of quiet that only comes when a man has already made peace with a decision. I went to the refrigerator first. The 3 lunches I packed the morning before were still inside. I tucked a folded note beneath Elijah's lunch bag without reading it again. I already knew what it said. I went to the kitchen counter and placed the white envelope down flat, pressing it once with both palms the way you press something you want to stay put. Inside that envelope was a scripture, 4 handwritten sentences, 1 per person, a brass key Angela had never seen, and a phone number with a single instruction written beneath it: "Not before 30 days." Angela's sentence had taken me 40 minutes to write. I rewrote it 11 times. I picked up my keys. I looked at the living room one final time. The couch, the carpet where Elijah always sat, the television Kofi loved more than sleep. I pulled the front door shut behind me like a man who knows how to leave without waking anyone. The envelope sat alone on the counter in the dark. She called 22 times before she accepted that I was actually gone. Angela woke at 7:15 a.m. I had always had coffee ready by 6. The silence of a coffeeless kitchen told her something before she was fully conscious. She walked out, saw the envelope, and reached for her phone instead of opening it, the way people delay the thing they're afraid of by doing the thing they can control. Voicemail. Again. His work line. Disconnected message. She walked to the bedroom. My side of the closet was not emptied, but the overnight bag was gone, the good shoes, and my father's watch that had not left that dresser in 2 years. She went back to the kitchen, picked up the envelope. Her hands were already shaking before the seal was broken. Scripture. 4 folded sentences, a brass key, a phone number, 30 days. She read her sentence. We don't need to know what it said yet. What matters is what happened to her face, the way it moved through confusion, then recognition, then something that looked very much like a woman finally seeing a mirror clearly for the first time. She sat down on the kitchen floor and stayed there. She called the boys to the kitchen and gave each of them their sentence. Kofi read his and immediately crumbled. Was it me? Did I make him leave? He was 9 years old, and the guilt on his face was the kind no child should ever carry. Angela pulled him in and said nothing because she had no honest answer that wouldn't cost her something. Elijah read his, folded it with precision, slid it into his pocket, then looked at his mother with a face that belonged on someone twice his age and said absolutely nothing. Devin read his twice, then held it in his closed hand. Angela looked at him. Say something, Devin. Devin looked up. He said he loved us. He told me to look after the 2 of them. A pause. He also said, don't let anger rewrite what was real. Devin put his note in his pocket, picked up his backpack, and walked out the front door to school. What he didn't say, the part of his sentence he kept entirely to himself, Angela would not learn for another 30 days, and when she finally did, it would reorder everything she thought she understood about her oldest son. Rochelle came over that evening with the face of a woman who had rehearsed what she needed to say. She sat across from Angela at the kitchen table. Let her talk. Let her explain the living room and the scold and the words she said, and listened without interrupting the way only true friends do, not because they agree, but because they know interrupting the confession ruins the conviction. When Angela finished, Rochelle was quiet for a moment. You told him to take care of his own. Yes. Angela, he doesn't have his own, he gave that up to choose yours. The silence that followed was the loudest thing in the house. You didn't just attack him as a stepfather, Rochelle said softly. You attacked him as a man who walked away from ever having biological children, to raise 3 boys who already had a father, and you did it in front of them. Angela stared at the table. What Rochelle did not say, not yet, not that evening, was that the old phone was currently sitting in her car, that she had borrowed it from Devin 3 days ago, that she had seen the messages, that she recognized the name Terrell because she had met him once, briefly, at a function 2 years before Angela married Barrion. She would tell Angela, just not tonight. 4 hours away, I sat on the porch of a cabin on land I had purchased 5 years before I ever met Angela. I had a legal pad, a pen, the kind of quiet that cities charge extra to escape from. I wasn't crying. I wasn't watching my phone. I was doing the thing I had trained myself to do during every hard season of my life. I was thinking clearly, on paper, without the noise of other people's reactions shaping my conclusions. I wrote, "She said take care of your own." I thought they were my own. That was the problem. I decided they were mine before she decided I was theirs. I put the pen down. Inside the cabin, pinned to the wall, were 2 photographs. One was Renee, the woman who died 3 days after our engagement and told me to show up fully for whoever came next. Beside it was a photograph I had taken myself. Elijah crossing the finish line at a track meet Angela had missed because of work. I had driven 40 minutes to that meet alone. I looked at both photographs for a long time. I hadn't come here to disappear. I had come here to decide whether love that is not fully received is still worth continuing to give. Elijah called on day 29. 1 day, early. Angela had honored the 30 days the way a person honors something they know they don't deserve to violate. She had cried. She had sat in a therapist's office twice and said things she had never said out loud. She had found the old phone, unlocked it, read every message, and deleted them with hands that would not stop shaking. She had not contacted Terrell once since the morning I left, but Elijah had a calendar pinned inside his closet door. He called the number 1 day early. It rang 3 times. I answered. Elijah. How did you know it was me? Because your mother would have waited the full 30. Devin would have respected the boundary, and Kofi would have lost the paper. He exhaled, the long kind, like a boy releasing 30 days of held breath. Are you coming back? I paused. That depends on something that isn't up to me. What is it? Whether the woman in that house is the same one who screamed at me, or the one I married. Elijah said nothing for a moment. Then quietly, she's different, Barrion. He was the only one of the 3 who never called me Dad out loud, until that phone call, until right then. Day 30. Angela was in the car at 6 a.m. before the neighborhood was fully awake. She didn't know the address, but Elijah slipped a folded piece of paper through her window before she reversed out of the driveway. She looked at him standing in the front yard in his track shoes and his school hoodie, and he just nodded once, the nod of a 14-year-old boy who had decided that love was worth 1 day's disobedience. She drove 4 hours. When she pulled up to the cabin, she understood immediately, from the land, from the structure, from the quiet ownership of it all, how little she had ever truly known about the man she married. I was already on the porch. She walked to the foot of the steps. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I heard Desmond's voice in you, she finally said, and you have never once sounded like him. I walked down the steps. She reached into her pocket and held up the brass key. You put my name on this land before we were even married, she whispered. The day we got engaged. She broke, not loudly, but completely. Devin, Elijah, and Kofi watched from the tree line, having followed her in Devin's car without a word to anyone. Renee had told me to show up fully. Standing on that gravel, I finally understood. Showing up fully sometimes means knowing when to stay gone long enough for the truth to find its way home.